Good evening, one and all, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Reggie Harris, and I'll be doing music with you for the next 15 minutes. Welcome to the 5th in our series, Voting Rights, The Struggle Continues. Walking down the freedom road, we're moving, chasing that dream. Walking down the freedom road, one step closer to the promised land. Walking down the freedom road, we're moving, chasing that dream. Walking down the freedom road, one step closer to the promised land. Oh, mama, it's been so long. Voice cries out, just not ready. He says, keep your eyes on the prize. We're gonna make it someday. Oh, mama, it's been so hard. Look at the world and my heart gets heavy. She says, keep your eyes on the prize. We're gonna make it someday. Oh, we're walking down the freedom road. We're moving, chasing that dream. Walking down the freedom road. One step closer to the promised land. Some say we're wasting our time, but we're moving, chasing that dream. Not gonna pay them no mind. One step closer to the promised land. Whoa, 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 yeah, yeah. Oh, 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 hey, hey, hey. Oh, keeping that fire burning, moving. Hey, we're never gonna let it go out. Moving. I feel that the tide is turning. Eyes on the prize, hands on that plow. Come too far to start turning back now. Standing on the banks of Jordan, we are wise and strong. And now we're walking down the freedom road. We're moving, chasing that dream. We're walking down the freedom road. One step closer to the promised land. Some say we're wasting our time. We're moving, chasing that dream. Not gonna pay them no mind. One step closer to the promised land. We're walking down the freedom road. We're moving, chasing that dream. We're walking down the freedom road. One step closer to the promised land. We're walking down the freedom road. We're moving, chasing that dream. We're walking down the freedom road. One step closer to the promise, closer to the promise, closer to the promised land. Indeed, we are walking down that freedom road. I'm Reggie Harris, and I am co-president of Living Legacy. And indeed, our mission at Living Legacy is to walk people down that freedom road and to walk with them. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We know that on the freedom road, we encounter the fact that so many people have been oppressed and marginalized. And in the words of Yara Allen, who sings with the Reverend William C. Barber, who was one of our principal speakers at our 2015 Marching in the Arc of Justice conference, she sings, "Somebody's been hurting my brother, and it's gone on much too long." Yes, it's gone on much too long. Yes, it's gone on much too long. And folks, we won't be silent anymore. Sing with me. Here's how it goes. Well, somebody's been hurting my brother, and it's gone on much too long. Yeah, it's gone on much too long. Well, it's gone on much too long. Well, somebody's been hurting my brother, and it's gone on on much too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Somebody's been hurting my sister, and it's gone on much too long. Hey, it's gone on much too long. Well, it's gone on much too long. Well, somebody's been hurting my sister, and it's gone on much too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Let's take it up. Well, somebody's been hurting my children, and it's gone on much too long. Well, it's gone on much too long. Well, it's gone on much too long. Well, somebody's been hurting our children, and it's gone on much too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Somebody's been hurting our planet, and it's gone on much too long. Well, it's gone on much too long. Well, it's gone on much too long. Well, somebody's been hurting our planet, and it's gone on much too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Well, somebody's been stealing our healthcare, and it's gone on much too long. Hey, it's gone on much too long. Well, it's gone on much too long. Well, somebody's been stealing our healthcare. It's gone on much too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Well, somebody's been suppressing our voters, and it's gone on much too long. Well, it's gone on much too long. Well, it's gone on much too long. Well, somebody's been suppressing our voters, and it's gone on much too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Sister, well, somebody's been hurting my sister, and it's gone on much too long. Well, it's gone on much too long. Hey, it's gone on much too long. Well, somebody's been hurting my sister, and it's gone on much too long, and we won't be silent anymore, and we won't be silent anymore, and we won't be silent anymore, and we won't be silent anymore. Somebody say amen. I'm telling you, we won't be silent.
Amen.
Yes, indeed. We know that people have been suppressing our votes, and people have been gerrymandering districts. And we see the evidence of that from the earliest times of people being denied the rights that they are guaranteed by our Constitution. So we are here tonight to celebrate this freedom that we have to work and make sure that everybody gets a right to vote. We know that the battle is hard. And we see that on the pilgrimages that we take at Living Legacy. As we go into Alabama and Mississippi, we know it happens all over the country. We see the evidence of that suppression. So we're singing tonight to set ourselves in motion. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up the freedom land. Sing that again. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, no, no, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. I'm gonna keep on walking, hey, keep on talking, marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let politicians turn me round, no, no, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let politicians turn me round. I'm gonna keep on walking, yeah, keep on talking, marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let money and politics turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let money and politics turn me round. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let race hatred turn me round, no, no, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let race hatred turn me round. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on, yeah, marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let my silence turn me round, no, no, turn me round, no, turn me round. Ain't gonna let my silence turn me round. I'm gonna keep on walking, yeah, keep on talking, yeah, marching up the freedom land. Nobody ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, yeah, yeah, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. I'm gonna keep on walking, yeah, keep on talking, marching up the freedom land. I'm gonna keep on walking, yeah, keep on talking, marching up the freedom land. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Yes. Yes, indeed. Ain't gonna let them turn us around. We've been working hard, registering people to vote, and tonight you're gonna get some amazing hands-on, on-the-ground information and advice on how you can make a difference. And we know that in these last days, we are going to have to step up in a new way in talking to our friends and our family and our neighbors and people in other states. I was sitting after one of the sessions, I believe it was after our second session, and a song began to form in my head. We have to get up early, we have to stay up late. We have to take it into our minds that we will make a difference in this election. We know that even one vote will count somewhere. So, let's meet up early in the morning is the name of this song. We got a hard fight coming. This won't be easy. I wanna open your eyes. We got a hard fight coming. Let's meet up early in the morning. We got a hard fight coming. It ain't no secret. Don't try to act surprised. We got a hard fight coming. Let's meet up early in the morning. There will be pain. There might be rain. I heard some thunder, so there ain't no doubt. There will be words spoken in tones that might hurt your feelings. We got a hard fight coming. This won't be easy. I wanna open your eyes. We got a hard fight coming. Let's meet up early in the morning. We got a hard fight coming. It ain't no secret. I wanna wear a disguise. We got a hard fight coming. Let's meet up early in the morning. If I were you, I would wear blue. Let's keep the colors to a minimum. Try not to shout. When things get rough, we might slide right by them. We got a hard fight coming. This ain't a secret. I wanna open your eyes. We got a hard fight coming. Let's meet up early in the morning. Nothing is what it seems. We can still fight harder when we keep our eyes set on that dream. We got a hard fight coming. And no secret. I wanna open your eyes. We got a hard fight coming. Let's meet up early meet up early in the morning. Let's stay up late at night. And tonight, we're going to hear some important information and some great wisdom from folks who are doing this work. Many of you have asked time and time again, what can I do? Well, tonight they're going to tell you what you can do. What you have already been doing, we thank you for that. And we thank you for joining us tonight. We know there's a lot going on, but we have something good for you tonight. And before I introduce our host for the evening, I want to remind you that we are continuing this series. And next month, on October the 27th, we're going to have a special program. We're going to have a concert. It's going to be like a mass meeting. You know, in the civil rights movement, folks would gather in churches all over the place, night after night, and they would sing for hours. Well, we're going to sing for about an hour. Joining me on that evening will be Greg Greenway, a wonderful singer-songwriter and collaborator with me on our Deeper Than the Skin show. And one of my absolute and total sheroes, Issei Barnwell, is going to join us. And the three of us will be having an evening of song, healing, and preparation for not only the election day, but for the work that will go on after. Because there will be work after. And we know that song created an atmosphere in which people over the years have renewed and restored themselves and charged out to make action and a reality. So join us next month, October 27th, 7:30, for a concert. Greg Greenway, Issei Barnwell, and myself, and the Reverend Gene Pupke from the First UU Church in Richmond will also be joining us for just a bit of an inspirational talk. So, thank you again for joining us tonight. I am so glad to be here, and I am really waiting to hear what comes across the Zoomosphere tonight. And before we move on, I want to introduce a dear friend of mine, a past president of Living Legacy Project. She is the Reverend Hope Johnson, and she is the former minister at the UU congregation in Central Nassau, New York. She is presently serving as the congregational life consultant for 2 Unitarian Universalist regions, the Central East region and also the Southern region. And Hope is a long-time advocate for peace, justice, and social action. She, in fact, is the person who brought me into Living Legacy. So I want to give a huge shout out and a welcome tonight to a fabulous and amazing shero who has made a great change in my life and also works at the mission that we so firmly believe is going to change this world. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Hope Johnson.
A special shout out to Reggie for the music of the movement. You know what I mean by the movement, right? If you don't, you need to look it up. The civil rights movement. I am also happy to acknowledge Reggie's role as co-president of the Living Legacy Project with his co-president, Jan Sneedus. You know, sometimes we hang around folks after concerts and tired excursions through the South. You find yourself in a room having a sipper, maybe a soda. Next thing you know, you're part of the team. You're on the board. What can I say? Thanks for saying yes, Reggie. I'm excited to offer these words of welcome. Welcome. I'm so happy that you took the time to engage with us in the important work of community, of bridge building, by starting at the Sankofa moment with a look at the past so that we can better understand the present and so that we can work together on the future. Please take a look at our website, our Facebook page, and more. Allow me, please, to use my, leadership, privilege, whatever, to share with you something important. I want to acknowledge these challenging times that we find ourselves in, I want to lift up the name Elandria Williams, an organizer who did so much for all of us. She's in my heart. She died last week at the age of 41. She didn't care about which group you belonged to, where you were from. She didn't care about any of that stuff. Based in Knoxville, Tennessee, she claimed the whole world as hers, as ours. So we will use her words as a centering piece. Let us take them to heart. And as we listen, let us remember the power that resides in each and every one of us. So here we are. Words by Elandria Williams. We are worthy. We're worthy not because of what we produce, but because of who we are. We are divine bodies of light and darkness. You're not worthy because of what you offer, not because of what is in your mind, not for the support you give others, not for what you give at all. We are worthy and are whole just because in this great turning, in this great pandemic, in this radical readjustment and alignment, we are not disposable. We are needed. We are the very people that have withstood everything that's been thrown at us. And as Maya Angelou would say, still, I rise. We arise from the pain. We rise from the grief. We arise from the limits people place on us and the limits we place on ourselves. We rise to be the children and the ancestors. We rise to be our true selves in relationship to our families and communities, recognizing our liberating and whole selves, honoring them and others as we strive for abundant communities, abundant lives, abundant relationships, and abundant values and cultural manifestations. We are worthiness personified. I, you, and we are worthy and deserve a life where we're not always fighting for our existence. Imagine what we could create if we were not always in the struggle. Imagine what we could envision if we could just be let to just go there. So tired of always having to resist, to fight, demanding, pushing, to everyone that has the courage, the power, the ability to co-create what we want and need, while rooting in what we can't lose and who we are. You are the visionary. You are the hope. You are our ancestors' dreams. No, you might not ever end up on some list somewhere, but you are on a list in someone's heart and mind. And if it's in how you move in the world, so people can see by example, you are the embodiment of what we need. Thanks to all that are the embodiment not of productivity, but the embodiment of radical love, care, and sanctuary. It's time, embodiment time. Embodiment, living one's values out loud. Let me every day live my values out loud. Let us every day live our values out loud, embodying our values, not the productivity quotient, beyond productivity, past productivity, true embodiment, life, life. in memory of Elandria Williams. And we offer this in peace. In closing, I'd like to just take a half a minute to introduce my dear friend and colleague in this work, Julian Sharp, member of the Board of Trustees, works at Sterling College. He actually came on board before he was a board member. Julian, we're glad you're here staying the course and moving us on and helping with the generations. My friends, I'm so excited to be together this evening. Let's go forth in love as we build some major bridges together. Blessings.
Thank you to the Reverend Dr. Hope Johnson for that wonderful welcoming and centering for our program this evening. I want to begin by letting our viewers know that we have a Q&A box, which is separate from the chat box. And so during our conversation this evening, I invite you to add questions to the box for our panelists. And so I would like to introduce three really incredible movement leaders and organizers. The Reverend Ashley Horan, who is the Organizing Strategy Director of the Unitarian Universalist Association, where she leads the team that holds the outward-facing justice ministries of the UUA, including UU the Vote, Side with Love, and Love Resists. Previously, Ashley was the Executive Director of the Minnesota UU Social Justice Alliance and the curriculum developer with Beloved Conversations, Meditations on Race and Ethnicity. She lives in Minneapolis with her partner, the Reverend Karen Hutt, and their children. Thank you for being here, Ashley. Susanne Huttner is a community organizer who found her calling after a career in science at the University of California. She is the North Carolina organizer and part of the national leadership group of Reclaim Our Vote, a campaign of the nonpartisan Center for Common Ground, which fights voter suppression through education and engagement with voters from communities of color. Thank you for being here, Susanne. And finally, we have Lisa Garcia Sampson, who serves as the executive director of Forward Together, the Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry of North Carolina. Lisa graduated from Boston University's School of Theology in 2018, and most recently served as the ministerial intern at First Church Boston. She recently received preliminary ministerial fellowship and will soon be ordained by her beloved home congregation, the First Unitarian Church of Providence. After living in the Northeast for the past 32 years of her life, Lisa moved to Durham, North Carolina in June of 2019 with her spouse, Rye, who is a family medicine resident at Duke. Thank you all for being here with us this evening. We so appreciate you taking the time so close to the election to share your thoughts and insight with us this evening. I'd like to ask Ashley if we could start with you to provide an overview of UU the Vote and some information about how this campaign came about.
My pleasure. And first of all, it's just so wonderful to be here tonight. I have often heard folks come back from the Living Legacy pilgrimages and from the programming that y'all have been doing over the years to just effusively proclaim the beauty of the programming you're doing. And so it's a real pleasure to be here with you all tonight. So the story of UU the Vote, President Susan Frederick Gray, the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, at GA our General Assembly, our annual denominational gathering in 2019, ended her speech to the delegates by proclaiming that in 2019 and 2020, we were going to UU the Vote. Now, at that point, neither she nor anybody else really knew what that meant. but I was hired a couple of months later as the organizing strategy director at the UUA. And one of the very first things that came onto my plate was President Susan sitting me down and saying, Ashley, look, we have 200,000 Unitarian Universalist members of our congregations. We have about 1,200 buildings. I think we could really show up way beyond our numbers to make a difference in the 2020 election. And we talked about how, as Unitarian Universalists, we believed that our values, our deep, profound belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all people, of our interconnection to one another, of our understanding of human agency and our belief in the democratic process, are truly antidotes to the public discourse right now, and certainly to what we see coming out of the current administration. And so as we began to conceive of this, we tried to figure out, what does this look like across 50 states, with the terrain looking so different in different places. And now, mind you, this is the fall of 2019. And so this is pre-COVID. And so we had grand plans for knocking on thousands and thousands of doors and building these deep partnerships that look like showing up together in physical spaces across the country, and getting people as fellows and having gatherings together to do trainings. And of course, that all shifted. So just as we were beginning to build our program, we launched in January of this year of 2020. And about 1,200 of our folks from across the country showed up for that first online event where we talked about what it was going to mean to UU the vote. And of course, COVID came and everything shifted. And so while I would say that the tactics have changed over the past year, the past number of months, it feels like a year, right, that we've been in COVID times. But for the past number of months, things have changed. We're no longer pretending like we're going to gather together in physical space. We're not canvassing door to door, but I think it's a real testament both to our organization and to the state of the movement more broadly, that folks are figuring out how to respond in this moment. So I'll give you some fun numbers about what's been going on in UU the Vote. We've got something north of 450 congregations who have some sort of UU the Vote program internally to them. And that can look like anything from folks gathering on Zoom to write postcards or phone bank together, to people showing up at city councils and demanding changes to the city council budget, the policing budget. It looks a lot of different places, but what's the beauty of this program is that it's encouraging folks to take leadership, to build organizing in their own congregations, and to respond locally to where it makes the most impact. So of those, 450 congregations, that also, we've got volunteers in all 50 states now. Something like 3,000 individuals that we have tracked as participating in this program, although we anticipate that number is actually significantly larger, because it turns out that collecting data from a bunch of our folks is very difficult. But our folks have done, 650 phone banks, making 200,000 calls so far. They've written almost 1 million postcards, 925,000 postcards to various voters. I know you're going to hear more about that from our friends later this evening. They've done 126,000 texts, and they've registered, and again, this is the data that we can track directly. Not all of our community partners are giving us the data back about who's actually registered, but we know that we've registered at least 10,000 voters so far. And so, we are somewhere north of 1,370,000 voter contacts with this campaign so far this year. And that's just, the quantifiable stuff. We know that our folks have been having relational organizing conversations where they're sitting down with people on their blocks, in their families, talking about these deep values. We know that folks are, again, showing up for ballot initiatives and city council meetings and all over the place. And I want to say one thing that is really inspiring to me about this program is that while, of course, we are running as hard as we can toward November 3rd, and we're getting all hands on deck for that, unlike many electorally focused organizations, for us, this has never just been about the election. We understand that the issues that are at play in this election are 365-day-a-year issues. And so we've had an organizing school. We've had many opportunities for volunteers to get training on various kinds of skills. We're creating these teams and congregations that we are hoping will evolve into other kinds of justice ministries after this. So whatever happens on November 3rd, and we also know that, of course, November 3rd, we are likely not to really have any information. And we also understand that we're looking potentially at a very serious period of disruption and potentially even violence after November 3rd as well. Our folks are prepared to know what congregational assets they have to share with their communities. They've deepened their partnerships with frontline community organizers so that they can be in relationship. And they're looking at the longer term ways in which we are working, not just through the electoral process, but through direct action, through community forums, through relationship building, through direct service, to strengthen our communities and bring our values to bear. So I know you're going to hear some really exciting specifics from Susanne and Lisa in a minute, but that's the general overview. And if you're curious to learn more about our program, I would encourage you to go to uuthevote.org, and you can see all of the many things that we've got going on there, including lots of videos and things to interact with there and ways to plug in for our phone banks. And I'll continue to plug that throughout the evening. Thanks, Julian.
Thank you. That's a really quite impressive and broad overview of the work you're doing. 10,000 folks registered to vote. Incredible. Wow. I'm wondering if, Lisa, we could turn to you for a moment to hear kind of an overview of the campaign Boots on the Ground that's happening right now in North Carolina, that kind of subset of the larger campaign.
Yeah, sure. So, and Ashley, thank you so much for that overview and this idea that this is not just about this election, and we are building relationships and deepening our faith, and no matter what happens, we're going to be stronger and in deeper relationship afterwards. This really has really grounded me in my time with You the Vote. So down here in North Carolina, I think you may or may not know some of the dynamics of our state, in that North Carolina is typically considered a significant state within the election, but also one that has traditionally suffered from a lot of different dynamics of voter suppression, whether it be purging of voter rolls and gerrymandering. There's a lot of the work, we often talk about things like phone banking and text banking and postcards and direct engagement with voters, but so much of our work here in North Carolina is also about just making sure that we're creating safe and fair elections, and that is a whole sort of pile of work in and of itself. So this year, I mean, so we've had some wins, and we belong to a really incredible network of partners in our state who have been fighting for wins like getting our voter ID law sort of taken away recently, expanding early voting, things like that. And this year, a lot of our work has continued to be sort of in that spirit of making sure that we have safe and fair elections. So, I have the privilege of working with 16 congregations and growing across our state. And we actually work in relational regional networks. So we have our Western North Carolina team, our East Coast team, our Charlotte-based team, and our Triangle Triad team. And so we're in really close relationships so we can do effective local work and deepen relationships across congregations within those 4 regions of our state. But some of the work that we've been doing this year is, and Ashley kind of pointed to it, so a lot of advocacy at a state level. So one thing that happened this year is previously there was a law put in place that you needed to have 2 signatures, 2 witnesses to sign your mail-in ballot. And for a lot of rural voters, elderly voters, people in a pandemic, that was something that we needed to fight as a state. So being engaged in the process of advocacy to make sure that rule was actually reduced. So now in this election, you only need one witness for mail-in ballots, which you can imagine how important that is in our state. So we've had wins like that we've been a part of. Another thing is we have 100 counties in North Carolina, and each county board of elections makes really critical decisions about things like early voting. And so we've played a really critical role in making sure that some instances, the work was we couldn't even figure out when the public meeting that legally had to be public was actually occurring, in which you could make public comments to help determine decisions about the early voting schedule. So what sites stayed open, and if we had Saturday and Sunday early voting and stuff like that. So our congregations were picking up the phone in their local counties saying, when is your meeting? When can I make that public comment? How do we make sure that we're making our voices heard so that polling early voting places don't get taken away? Similarly, the average age of a poll worker in North Carolina is 70 years old. And so we had to do a lot of extra work to pick up the phone with counties. And some counties have a waiting list of 50 people long for poll workers who are ready to go. Other counties didn't and still don't. And so we're picking up the phone and saying, do you need poll workers? Because what tends to happen, and what we've seen happen in other states, Wisconsin, Georgia, that if we get too close to the election and suddenly with 5 days to go, we don't have any poll workers because of this pandemic, and people who have traditionally played that role are opting out, then that results in voting places being eliminated. So this is some of the work that we've been doing to make sure we have early voting, to make sure we have voting locations, especially for our rural areas where people may need to, there's no public transportation, you may need to rely on a ride to get to a polling place, things like that. But beyond that type of work, and Susanne and I will talk about this in a little more detail in a second, is that we've been doing a lot of direct voter engagement work. So what that looks like, just like Ashley said, we had a plan and then we changed that plan, we had a different plan, we changed that one. We're on plan like M, I think, at this point. But what we've ended up doing is really focusing on phone banking and postcard writing. And we've had the privilege of working with Reclaim Our Vote to write about 30,000 postcards this year. We've engaged over 650 Unitarian Universalists across the state writing postcards, and a lot of them are to purge voters in our state, which is a huge issue. Multiple times a year, we see hundreds of thousands of voters purged from the voter rolls. And so that amazing campaign that so many people across our country have participated in, a lot of the time, the postcards written to North Carolina voters was to notify them that they've either been purged from the voter rolls or that they're close to being in that situation. And then we phone bank. We do tons of phone banking, and I think some of the joy of phone banking in this day and age is that everything has changed, and we've embraced that. We've really tried to see the opportunities that have come about in this pandemic. And so we have a phone bank every Thursday night where it's open to folks all across the country. And so I have congregations. We have congregations about 13 of them who have participated in our Thursday night phone bank in partnership with Reclaim Our Vote and the North Carolina NAACP. And we have a host congregation every week, and it's developed its own culture. And now we have people who are friends from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and Seattle, Washington. And these connections that I never imagined happening. And I said recently in one of our Unitarian Universalist events that I've never felt more connected to this faith than I do right now, and I've never loved this faith more than I do right now. And it's because I feel so deeply connected and in such rich, amazing relationship with people across the state and the country. And I'll share one thing before I pass it over, that 3 weeks ago, we had the Community Church of Chapel Hill host our Thursday night phone bank. And they set a goal to see how many people they could get to their phone bank. And they reached that goal. And the bet was that if they reached that goal, the RE director had to dye her hair the color voted on by the congregation. So they ended up voting on purple. And the next week, they revealed the RE director shows up, sure enough, with purple hair. So the Seattle congregation, who shows up every week, hosted the next week, and they said, we're going to do the same thing. So they ended up doing a challenge, and they met their challenge goal. And next week, we're going to have their leader, Steve, show up with vote shaved in the back of his head. So what I mean to say there is you never know what's going to happen. And I think this campaign has changed and deepened my understanding of what faith is, in that you don't start with a plan and you don't start with all the information and all the resources and people you need. You just start, and you have the faith in the abundance of a community. And when you gather together, you spark each other's imagination, and you just don't know what's going to happen, but you have faith to know that we're moving together and something special is going to happen. And so that's sort of been the story of my time with UU the Vote, and it's all about relationship, and that's, I think, why we're still going right now. I think that's why we still have smiles on our faces, because we lift each other up, we learn from each other, we're changing and growing with one another. That's the heartbeat of this campaign.
Thank you so much for sharing some of that really critical and incredible work that you're doing. And I'm getting really fired up listening to all this wonderful work and some of the really creative tactics that you're using to engage folks. That's really quite remarkable. And I'd like to turn to Susanne and ask for kind of an overview of the work that you're doing, keeping on the kind of the same topics, same geographical location of North Carolina. And in a different perspective, you're working outside of communities of faith and with an organization, Reclaim Our Vote, that is specifically reaching out to communities of color. And so if you could tell us about your work, please.
Okay, thank you. And thank you so much for including me. It's a real honor to be included in this very important series of events that you've been presenting. And thank you, Lisa, for inviting me to join you in this discussion. So working with Reclaim Our Vote has been a very important opportunity for me. This is a part of the Center for Common Ground, and it is a people of color-led organization focused entirely on voters of color in voter suppression states. Our goal is to increase the voter turnout this year by 20% in those communities. And I think you can appreciate what that challenge is. There are so many people who have just given up. They've been excluded for so long. They get such inaccurate, incomplete information that they sometimes don't even know an election's happening, as surprising as that might be, but it's true. So our approach is to take advantage of a year like this, or 2018, or last year when there were 2 special congressional elections in North Carolina, to try to include more and more people in this process of civic engagement, that we need a participatory democracy as part of our everyday life if we're going to make the kind of changes we need. And that was true before the problems of the last 4 years raised their ugly heads. And it's going to be even more true going forward, regardless of the outcome of this election. We have an enormous amount of work to do. So our goal is to allow people to have an opportunity to participate. So the approach is to respect people, to include them from wherever they're coming, whatever makes them passionate about trying to get involved, and respecting they may be very fearful about getting involved in this kind of work, but then train them, empower them, and organize them. So we provide tools and tactics and technology and training. And the most important thing that we do is find people like Lisa Garcia Sampson, because she instantly gave us access to people in communities across the state, people who respected and trusted their faith leaders when they said, why don't we consider working with this organization? Why don't we consider getting involved in the elections this year? And I imagine it was a fairly large percentage of people who had never done anything like that before. They needed not just only to be trained by us, they needed to be supported locally. And so I can only say thank you, Lisa, for your leadership, but more importantly, your organizing skills. The first time I met Lisa was on a Zoom conference call with Andrea Miller, who is the person who created Reclaim Our Vote, the Center for Common Ground, and so much more, a real force of nature. And I was, just listening because I'm in a lot of these kind of calls, and I'm just trying to pay attention to who is that person there in North Carolina, and what is she doing, and how does she fit in what we're doing? Oh my goodness, Lisa checked all the boxes. It was like, woohoo, I am so lucky. This is someone who understands organizing. And Ashley, thank you for talking about doing organizer training. That is so important. That's the biggest investment we can make. Having somebody who knows how to work with people and then keep them involved over time is how we're going to make all of this change that we need to make happen and continue it afterwards. Make people feel like, yeah, that's right. This is something I can do, and that they have the confidence, the self-confidence to do it, because we're going to need them to work on all sorts of things. After this election, the number of challenges are going to be huge. But I don't know how you all feel. I bet most of the people who are on this call are involved somewhere. They're somewhere and somehow, right? And I think you probably share with me the idea that getting involved in voter engagement and get out and vote and all that can be a transformative experience. It's like it changes your life. Well, that's what we're hoping, is that it's going to, people have that experience, and then through the congregations, through their communities, that they'll be able to find a path going forward that's continuous, because it is going to be a big task. It's going to be a really heavy ask for the next several years. Among other things, we need to get a voting rights amendment, and it's going to have to be ratified in every single state. I mean, when you think about it from that point of view, you see, we're in this now. We've made great progress, but we still have a whole lot more to do. So to the extent that we, through our organization, can provide people with tactics and tools and training and technology, we are just so happy to be able to play that role. If that helps people get the experience and get the confidence, that is fantastic. I can't wish for anything more.
Thank you. It sounds just like the work each of you has described is really incredible, so remarkable on the ground. And I'm wondering, how did each of you become personally involved in the work of voting rights? And additionally, if you can tell us about the stakes of this election, how is it different from previous elections? Ashley, could we start with you?
Sure. I think I'm going to just be straight up honest and say that I believe, like Angela Davis does, that voting is harm reduction and not justice making. That actually our government is not actually going to bring us collective liberation without pressure. Our job in voting is to elect the people who are most organizable toward our values. And so in that sense, it was it really took me a long time to get on board with electoral work as where I wanted to put my energy and my time. Not because I didn't understand the value of it, but because I thought that and I continue to think that there are so many other places where I could be of more use. And that brings me to the stakes question, because I believe that this election has greater stakes, certainly than any that we've seen in my lifetime, and potentially ever in the history of the United States, at least, because I deeply believe that we are verging on authoritarianism and fascism, and a takeover of extremely conservative values. And I wouldn't even call them values. Actually, I would call it authoritarianism, and the shredding of rights from communities that I deeply care about right now, including Black, Indigenous, and people of color folks, queer folks, transgender folks, disabled communities, poor people. There are literal lives on the line, as we've seen with the government's response to COVID, as we've seen with the gutting of everything from the Voting Rights Act to policies targeting immigrants and any number of other groups. People are dying. There are literal babies in cages right now. And if we do not have other folks in power from the national to the local level who are willing to make different choices that are more in alignment with liberation, people that I love are going to die. They're already dying. And so we need every single person who potentially can access the right to vote, knowing that that's not everybody, because the forces in power have already been so successful in stripping that right from so many groups of folks. We need everybody to vote in order to have a situation in government that is actually organizable, that we can pressure, that we can move toward our values. So I'll end there, but my comrades, I'm sure, have other things to add to that.
Thank you. Lisa, would you be willing to add some more?
I don't know what to add, Ashley. I just, I really appreciate your words. Never go after Ashley. So I think, I mean, the honest answer for me about how I started getting engaged in this work, I came into this role as the executive director of our North Carolina Unitarian Universalist ministry in February. I was trained to be a parish minister, and I did not have very much experience within with electoral work and voting work. But when you work with the people I get to work with, first, I had to learn North Carolina, and I didn't know North Carolina very well. I was still only, less than a year new to the state. And when I started working with folks across our state and hearing their experiences about how they've been poll workers for 30 years, 40 years, how they've been, this is 365-day a year work for them. When I met people like Susanne, who had I know that Susanne and I, like, that I'll be texting her in 4 years from now. Like, there's no, oh, I'm gonna miss Susanne when this is over. Like, there's not a shred of thinking in that direction, because I have been shown the larger vision and the role of voting work in this larger vision for collective liberation, not because I got there myself, but because people I love brought me there. And they showed it to me in the way that they are passionate about this work. I think that's the honest answer for me. And yeah, I'm at a loss for words about how to describe the depths of what's at stake right now. Yeah, I echo what Ashley has said, and I'd like to hear Susanne and hear a little bit more from you about your thoughts on this.
So I'll say what the stakes are from my perspective, and it's nothing short of our democracy. However you can most broadly and vividly envision this, that's it. That's what's at stake. But more importantly, in terms of our society, it is the permanent disenfranchisement of huge segments of our community, not just politically, but economically, in ways that they will not recover from. It'll be generational. And I'm sorry, that's just a fact, and I wouldn't have said this 4 years ago. I would have said we had all of these things happening and they were very serious, but this time we've reached a tipping point, and I think that there's not going to be any easy recovery from it. But yeah, to tell you, all I did was before 2017, I would just occasionally, do phone banking or canvassing or, things like that. And it made me feel really good that I did it, but I didn't really feel like it was part of my life. I just did it. And then right after the inauguration in 2017, there were two very important things announced by the White House. And one was the movement to repeal the Affordable Care Act, what they called Obamacare, and the attack on immigrants in the United States. I live in California, even though I'm organizing in North Carolina, which is my privilege, and I love it so much. But I do a lot of work in the Central Valley now. And so I work a lot with the Latino and immigrant communities, their farm working communities and all that. And I saw it instantly what happened to those communities. And so that, it just was like a switch went on my head, just went boom, you got to do something. And I decided, as Ashley had said, I had to learn how to organize. I needed to know how to do something here because whatever I did professionally before wasn't going to be enough. And so doing organizing training, any opportunity you have, any time, you can never have enough skills, you can never have enough tools, and it just makes your life better and better and better.
Thank you. So the stakes could not be more high, is what I'm hearing. And so I think many of our viewers are wondering, given that the stakes are so high, how can our viewers motivate people in their own communities, family members, co-workers, neighbors, to not only vote, but become advocates and helping other folks in their communities, encouraging other folks to vote and do this kind of nonpartisan election outreach work. So I'm wondering, maybe Lisa, we could start with you. Are there issues or strategies that are resonating with communities that you're organizing? How are you specifically motivating people to get out and to vote and to become engaged with their neighbors and communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think to give a really specific answer, a tool that I've been using lately is when the sort of point of conflict is somebody's faith in their ability to make an impact. I think first listening with incredible compassion. We do a lot of phone banks where people, I mean, that's the hardest, when we debrief phone banks, it's the hardest thing that people come back with is when they say people they say, I'm not gonna vote. I have a lifetime of experience that you can, people's sense of disenfranchisement and that's why you have to start with compassion. You have to start with listening and understanding, especially depending on if people have an experience of being disenfranchised, to make sure that you're listening with compassion to what's at the heart of that feeling of being powerless. And then I think from that space of listening without judgment, with genuine curiosity, to try to seek common values within that conversation, to try to listen deeply, to understand where your values align with that person's values, and then share, after really demonstrating a relational experience of listening deeply, to share your own experiences of why you have faith that this matters. And I think the word faith keeps coming up for me. So the Unitarian Universalist Association held an organizing school called It Starts With Faith. And when I heard the name of that, I just kind of sat with it for a second and thought, that's something about that name is really kind of striking me. And I think, I said this before, my sense of what faith is has deepened in this time together, because I really believe that you do need to, when you're making this, when I'm picking up the phone with my brother to try to convince him to vote because the guy that he wanted to be voting for isn't in the game. When I do that, that's an act of faith, that I am adding drops to the bucket, and somewhere, even though I can't see it, I have the faith to know that that bucket is overflowing. And so I think that is a source of power within faith communities, to really activate and just name it for what it is, that we are moving together even when we can't see it, and we are at a tipping point. And if we believe that that's actually a tipping point towards liberation, if enough people believe that that is the tipping point that we are at, then maybe we can make it so. And the only thing holding us back is our belief in that. So faith is critical. Faith and compassion, I guess, are the two I'd lift up.
Thank you. Susanne, can you share about some of the issues or strategies that are resonating in the communities of color that you work with?
Are you talking about in terms of our outreach, our voter engagement? Yeah.
Exactly. In terms of helping our viewers to understand, in terms of their own outreach, how they can motivate folks in their own communities to become involved and vote.
So we often are targeting communities that are more rural, they're more isolated. They're low income if they are in more urban areas, so they're in different parts of the community. And so what we try to do is make sure that whatever we send to them is inclusive. It's visually inclusive, it's welcoming. So for instance, the postcards that Lisa talked about have been designed specifically to be multicultural, to be multiracial. People could look at it and say, hey, that's me. And when the postcard image has a hand, has 3 hands going up, it has little cards saying your vote is your power, vote your power, your vote is your voice, those kinds of things. They look at it, it's like, wow. And then on the other side, it's handwritten. Somebody took the time to write a note and say, it's so important for you to vote. Just, you're invited back. Please, please come and vote. And here's how you do it. And then there's the specific information there. The most important thing is the personal contact, whether it's a postcard or it's phone banking. And I'm still on the fence about texting, but people say it really, really works. It seems impersonal to me, but the other two I like. That is very personal, especially when you get them on the phone and you're talking to somebody. And as Lisa said, you take your time, you listen, you hear about what they care about, what's going on, and then you tell them a little bit about voting, ask them how they plan to vote. That conversation means so much in communities that are left out by the traditional campaigns. The political campaigns write a lot of these voters off because they're typically considered low propensity voters. Now they're getting more attention this year, right? Because they saw what happened in a few states. These communities did vote, but you know, we can't count on that, and there hasn't been a long history of it. So we still reach voters who have never been called before, ever, never been called before. So I just say it's the person-to-person thing, getting people to feel in their hearts that this is a very good thing they're doing and overcome whatever reluctance they have. We actually have a training that's called phone banking for introverts, specifically to overcome that.
I love that, training for introverts. That's great. Ashley, do you have anything to add in terms of what's really motivating with the communities you're working with?
Sure. I want to just make a note here. I believe that all 3 of us who are guests tonight identify as white folks. Is that right? And I want to be clear about, you know, we talked internally about, do we want to try and get some partners or some of the folks who are organizing on the ground who are from communities of color. And one of the answers that we came up with is that actually, this is a shift that the 3 of us as white folks could take, because the folks who are working in communities of color and who are part of those communities are doing such incredibly important work. And so I'm going to speak specifically to my white siblings right now and talk about how, you know, everybody's talking about communities of color, poor communities, et cetera, that, you know, those are the low propensity voters that we need to get out. We also need to be talking to white suburban voters about their values and about how they're voting and the impacts of those votes. And those conversations, for some of us who have access to those communities, are incredibly, incredibly important. And I think so there's a whole concept in electoral work called relational organizing, right? There are these apps where you can have conversations with people in your own network who you're connected to through Facebook or who are in your contact list. But this idea of having these really deep values-based conversations is actually much scarier for some of us than it is to think about calling a stranger or writing a postcard to somebody who you're never going to be in relationship with. But I want to say that some of the most moving conversations that I have had have been, for example, with my own family members who have voted Republican in the past, for example, in my family. Now, I know we're talking, this is off the clock, right? So I'm being careful about 501c3 stuff. But for me personally, I had some real deep conversations with folks in 2016 about, like, I need you to think about my family, my queer, multiracial family, and the ways in which if you vote for this person, it's going to impact me personally. Here's the way that I'm already seeing this with people I love. And the ability to do that on a person-to-person basis, rather than, you know, anonymously through a text or a phone bank or whatever, is huge. And so I think I really want to push, you know, even if you're not somebody who's going to sign up for a phone bank, who are you talking to in your own networks? How are you taking the risk and being vulnerable enough to speak about your own values to the people who you have access to in your own networks?
Thank you. I'm hearing so many great ways of reaching out to those that we love and those who are in our communities. You know, whether it be through simply, you know, reaching out with a text or a conversation, or what have you, all these wonderful strategies to engage folks in our communities. And keeping on that same topic, I'm going to invite Susanne and Lisa to tell us a little bit about the collaboration between your two organizations and what that work looks like and how it amplifies your work.
It's hard to know where to start because it's so organic, and it's really, you know, I think as I'm trying to remember our first conversation, Susanne, and how it all began. I think it began with we'd like to do some postcards with you all. That was the beginning. And yeah, I think, I don't really know where to begin, but I think at the heart of this partnership has been, I think we make each other better. And I think there's a genuine affection between our organizations. And the thing that I'll just sort of talk about, the privilege of working with Reclaim Our Vote, is that Susanne is someone who continually widens the circle. Susanne has introduced me to organizations as a new person new to my role in North Carolina. Susanne is someone who's trying to understand the larger picture, is not concerned with, is not interested in duplicating services or trying to compete. There's none of that transactional competition, none of that exists within my partnership with Reclaim My Vote. We've always felt that this is for the long haul. This is, let's widen the circle. Let's make sure everybody knows each other. And I'm going to introduce you to this person. These folks are doing great work. We don't need to be doing this because these folks are already doing this great work, but we want to make sure we know them and we're connected with them. And so I've just had the privilege to really, Susanne has really introduced me to people that I already should have known in North Carolina, and has done so with incredible grace, and is always looking towards the larger vision and not figuring out how our organizations can, you know, can be sort of functioning in a way that's territorial or in competition, but always the North Star is the larger vision of liberation. So yeah, I just want to say that about Susanne and Reclaim Our Vote and how they've made us so much better. We would not have activated the number of folks that we have if it weren't for having a really positive experience with postcarding and recognizing that that was a way to build a base to then engage folks in a deeper sort of way through phone banking, and then just see what happens next. Yeah, Susanne, I don't know what you'd like to add about us.
Well, I'd just say that you have to remember, I'm working from California and trying to organize in North Carolina. And so I approach this as I need to meet everybody and pick their brains, learn everything I can about what they know about North Carolina. And so when I ran into Lisa in that first conversation, and she had already a network across the state, including in some areas that are really hard to work in for a lot of reasons, that, I'm telling you, that just eased my concerns dramatically. She made it clear to me that there were already people boots on the ground. Even if they were kind of new to doing the work, they were there. And she already had them talking to the county offices, which is no small feat, as she was explaining earlier. That's really important. And you got to be paying attention every single month when they meet so that nothing untoward happens, let me put it that way, right? So that was important to me. My goal was to try to get a super organizer in every single county, right? And I thought, I'm never gonna do this, 100 counties, this is just way too hard. Then I found out, well, she already does. She already has 100. Now this is what my North Carolina map looks like. So the yellow ones are where we do have super organizers, and I didn't even bother to put in Lisa's because it would have lit up all the rest of the map, you know? So I can tell you, this was just perfect. It was a natural partnership, and it's been so easy. I gotta say though, she's pretty demanding. She wants her addresses now.
Susanne has bailed me out of major pickles before, and I think that's. I mean, I think we want to show up and we want to bring our best to the partnership. But I have been in pickles where I have not had the addresses that I've needed for my congregations. And Susanne, I don't know what you. I don't know if I want to know how you got me those addresses, but. Yeah, I've definitely you've bailed me out before, and I really appreciate that. And hope you know that you really try to prioritize North Carolina, because you have Reclaim Our Vote has activated this entire country to write postcards for states like North Carolina, and so it goes to show that in prioritizing making sure that North Carolinians were writing postcards to North Carolinians, it shows the values, because you could have done this work in a very different way, but it was always in the service to making sure that when November's over, that we're still building something here. And I've got my map right here.
All right. Oh, I love her map. Yes, you see, they complement each other.
Yeah.
She's got the spaces I don't have, and I've got some of the other spaces. I think that one thing that I don't know if people appreciate, but the rate of volunteering since the tragic events that happened in the spring, the killings, has been unbelievable. So we got 20,000 new volunteers over the course of about 2.5 months. And these are people who are committed to taking action right now. Most of them are not in our 8 target states and not in the voter suppression states. And so one of the most important things we've done is make sure that as we built our organization, we put special priority around supporting the organizers working in our target states. And that means they had to learn how to do that relational organizing. And if anybody knows who Marshall Gans is, the famous organizer, he has this concept of a snowflake, right? And you put yourself or your group in the center of the snowflake, and you see how the snowflake arms go out, right? Well, you start building a few of the little nodes with organizations, groups that you have, and they connect you to more, and they connect you to more. That's a powerful organizing method. And it's something that now our organizers in our target states, 90% of whom had never done any organizing in their life. They thought they were only signing up to help postcarders. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you. This is such a fruitful conversation, and it feels like we're just getting started, and yet we're out of the allotted time that we have been given. So what I'd like to ask of our panelists, if you would be willing, instead of changing gears and heading to another Zoom chat, where we can have more conversation. I'm wondering, since we have about 25 minutes until the first debate starts, if we could just stay here and answer some of the questions that have come through in the Q&A. Would that be okay with the 3 of you?
You know, I actually need to run. I have a baby bedtime that's happening right now. But I'm hoping, Lisa and Susanne, are you able to stay and answer a couple of questions? Thank you. I'll close by saying that my own mantra that I say to everybody all the time is we need to take shifts for the revolution. And so I was on shift tonight to do this panel, and I need to go take care of my babies now. And I'm hoping that all of you are taking your shifts as well, whatever that looks like for you. Find the way that you can plug in, go deep and push yourself one step past where your comfort zone feels, and keep going and find the people who will be with you in that. And that's my blessing to you all as you continue this conversation tonight. And gratitude to Susanne and Lisa for the beautiful work that you're doing, and to all of the Living Legacy folks who have been hosting this profound series of conversations. Thank you.
And we thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us this evening.
Absolutely. All right, take care, everybody. We'll see you later.
So I still have a number of questions which we will not be able to get to, but I want to get to a couple of the questions from folks in our audience. One person has asked, can people who are not UUs volunteer with UU the Vote? I'm going to assume that the answer is an enthusiastic yes, and Lisa, you can confirm.
Yeah, absolutely. And we really have. I mean, our postcard projects have in our state, reached out to other faiths and friends. And so yes, we absolutely invite folks into the fold, whether it be through our national phone banks that are occurring. We have a week of action happening in October, uuthevote.org, people can jump in, and then Reclaim Our Vote, of course. There are many entry points into volunteering with one of our major UU the Vote partners, Reclaim Our Vote, through phone banking, text banking, and maybe a little bit more postcarding. I don't know if we're at the tail end of that.
Thank you. And thank you to Charles for that question. Judy and Gordon Gibson have asked, they have written, I'm struck by how much the flexibility, adaptability, and capacity to improvise reflects the movement of the 1950s and 60s. How much connection do you feel to the earlier phase of the movement?
Well, I feel an actual age-wise connection to the 60s. I tell you, I was there. But 50s, no, there was a toddler, so that wouldn't have worked. My grandfather founded the Hotel and Restaurant Workers Union in Minneapolis in 1938. And although we lived away from him, I would see him all the time, and he would take me aside and talk to me about this. And I was always intrigued by what he had accomplished for that community. Some of his children actually worked in that industry, but I never really understood what it was. And so now, as I'm looking at all of this, I realize it was his ability to talk to people in a way that they felt that they were being heard, and then to take them in a conversation and do what organizers call pivoting. So you take them from where they're at, you understand their values, and then you try to get them to pivot on an issue in a way that supports their values and helps them see that it is consistent with what they believe in to do this other thing. And so it was when I was in college that I started to appreciate what it was that he was doing. And I really wish I had started doing it back then, but you know, you have your own ideas when you're young. But that's where the adaptability comes from. That's where the creativity in the face of challenges comes from, is listening and seeing that you've got something that you need to accomplish, but you've got to bring people along, because none of these people are paid to work for you, right? They're all volunteers, right? So you have to know how to do that. That's why I say, if you think this might be fun for you, take some organizing training. There's lots of it available.
Thank you. And Lisa, do you see kind of this connection between the work that you're engaged in now to the work that was the Living Legacy Project focuses on in terms of the movement of the 50s and 60s and the strategies, the tactics that were employed during those various campaigns?
Yeah, I think to reiterate what Susanne said, I think this has been, this whole time since the pandemic began has been looking at how the places where we experience challenge, and how if we sit with them long enough, we can actually uncover the opportunity, so that there's something to leverage there. And so even like the idea that I feel deeply connected to a congregation in Seattle, Washington, and we've made connections like that, or our Unitarian Universalist faith, we said, well, what if we have, our president give a worship service, and we could offer it across our entire denomination. It has never been the case before, and maybe will never be the case afterwards, that we could possibly pull off our president preaching in every congregation across the country in one Sunday. That's just a denominational example, but I think recognizing where we see challenge and sitting with it long enough to recognize the opportunity there, and that just creative process seems to me to be really hearkening back and taking lessons from the civil rights movement.
Thank you. And Susanne, Kim Estelle has asked if you would share more information about the Voter Rights Amendment.
Okay, so right now that's an idea. It's something that was seeded by the wonderful John Lewis. He had an act that had been sitting dormant for months and months that had been passed by the House. And it's really clear that we can't rely just on legislation. We need to have the Constitution amended. So what I'd like to do, instead of trying to outline what's going to happen, because it's all being formulated in real time, is to encourage you to consider going to Andrea Miller's briefing on Thursday. She does this almost every Thursday, where she talks about what's going on in Reclaim Our Vote and, you know, what we're accomplishing and what we need to do next. This Thursday, she's going to be talking about not just what we have to do until November 3rd, but how we're going to pivot afterwards and then move forward. So I just put in the chat box the link so that you could sign up for it. It's bit.ly/ROV briefing. So that's the thing is, you know, stay close to people like Andrea and others who are going to make this happen.
Thank you. This next question is from Susan, and it's more of a personal reflective question. And it says, this series has highlighted activists of color working for voting rights with white allies alongside. The majority of us attending this are white. What have you learned about the process or yourselves in working with your collaborators of color?
Yeah, I mean, I think listening and making sure there's so many things that within our for Unitarian Universalists, our tradition, that we've developed a deeper awareness of, speaking to my white siblings within our denomination, to recognize the instinct to feel entitled to be at the table making decisions, to when being given and when asked, how can I help? When we're given an answer from a frontline community of color that's saying, actually, you can help this way, that too often, many of us who are white and have just that instinct and that sort of living in our bones, that we are entitled to say, well, I think we could do it a different way, or wouldn't it be better if we did this way, or I don't want to, or I'd rather do this, or this is the role that I bring. We're still trying to be present, again, speaking to white siblings in this space. I think we're still trying to, with humility and honesty, recognize that that's still very much so alive in us. And so I think that's really significant. I think the other important thing is that we are in relationship. This is all about relationship. The lessons that I've learned marrying into a family of color and having my family and my closest relationships my family having different life experiences from me, is that it's grounded in love and compassion. And so when I stick my foot in my mouth, or when I've really done something that has impacted our relationship, that we build it back with love, and that I hold myself accountable to be accountable to those relationships, and to work to repair those relationships, and to say when I'm wrong, and to say when I don't know. I think these are the most courageous things sometimes that white folks in solidarity can say, is I don't know, and I'm sorry, and how can I move back into right relationship with you? And so I've learned that personally within my family, and I think that's true within our relationships as well, that it has to be about relationship. And if we make a mistake and get buried in guilt and shame, and aren't able to return back into right relationship and make sure that we're accountable, that accountability is there, then that's we need to keep moving. We need to act, learn, stay in relationship.
I would just say that for me, the most important thing is to recognize this is about communities of color, and it's not about us. Except to the extent that if we don't improve the situation for communities of color, our society, our culture is going to continue to have serious problems, and we're going to lose huge opportunities for, just richness in our lives. But the most important thing for me is to support communities of color and to align myself with leaders of color and take their lead. It's about what they think is important and how they bring it forward. And we have a voice in that to some extent, but it's about them. That's why I hooked up with Center for Common Ground and Andrea and Reclaim Our Vote. And it's been a wonderful experience. The other thing is, don't parachute in. Don't jump in because it's the hot time and it's an election and all that, and then you leave after November 3rd. Recognize that these issues that people are dealing with in these communities are sustained. They don't get breaks from them. They need help all the time. And see how you can work within communities and support what they're doing locally.
Thank you for both of those insightful answers. I know we only have here about 8 minutes left. There's been so much focus on the national election, and I'm wondering, you both are working on the ground in North Carolina. Are there local races that are motivating folks, and are there resources that you can share with our audience, a website that we can access important information about those local and statewide or countywide races? Whichever one of you would like to.
Yeah, so I think that first of all, the bottom of the ticket is critical. It's actually one of our most important things that we say when people say they don't want to vote in the election because they have really strong feelings about the top of the ticket. That we talk about how so many of the things that impact our lives happen in races at the bottom of the ticket. You Can Vote, which is one of our main partners here in North Carolina, has a really great resource that talks about education, healthcare, civil rights, all of the sort of the really critical buckets that impact our lives. And they have really detailed lists of which elected officials most directly impact those issues. And so I think there are great websites out there. National Vote 411 is great, that actually gives candidate comparisons, but You Can Vote has a really great resource in North Carolina to say, what are the bottom level ticket sort of races? How do they impact, of course, attorney general, sheriff races? These are really important right now as well. So knowing what those races are I really appreciate that question because it's not getting enough attention. And I think we underestimate how impactful these races are in our lives.
I agree completely. It's the local races that motivate the voters because they're attached to something the voter really sees day in and day out, and they don't see anybody at the top of the ballot ever doing anything for them. But if you can get them in because of a supervisor or city council or whatever, right? That local race, it could be have to do with school boards, it could have to do with water boards, it could be anything like that they really care about. Talk to them about that, and then they'll show up. And they're going to probably, vote appropriately on all the other things too. They will not just skip voting on that. There are a couple of other organizations I just mentioned now. These are nonpartisan organizations that Lisa and I are talking about. So they're not going to be telling you where to go or whatever. But the North Carolina NAACP has a major initiative right now called Make Good Trouble. And I just love what they're doing. So that's a good one. There's another organization that's led by Eric Holder, the former Attorney General in the Obama administration. It's called All on the Line. And it is focused entirely on fighting gerrymandering. And North Carolina has suffered greatly from gerrymandering. I mean, there was no way to win so many of the districts because of the way they had drawn the maps. This is a census year. So based on the census outcome, next year they're going to redraw the maps. Now, who's going to redraw those maps? A lot of those people are the people you're voting on this time. So that's another thing to pay attention to, that these people are going to be playing really important roles in voting rights going forward. And that's not so obvious. So that's all on the line.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. On behalf of the Living Legacy Project, I really want to appreciate the time that you've given to us and to our audience members, our viewers this evening. This work is so critical, we know, for the future of our planet, for the future of all of our communities. So we are so deeply appreciative for you to taking the time this evening to be with us. And now, without further ado, I have the honor of turning us back over to the one and only Reggie Harris, a wonderful colleague and co-president of the Living Legacy Project. Reggie, take it away.
Well, thank you, Julian, and thank you to our speakers for the evening and the information and the commitment that you've shown. We leave you tonight. We know that there is a debate tonight, and there will be days of back and forth and up and down and information coming at us from all directions. We have to remember that, as with the civil rights movement, collective community is our strength. And so, we will not rest until the storm is over. We will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. Don't forget to make a note in your calendar. Join us on October 27th for a Song Fest of Freedom. And sing with me as we leave fortified to make this journey our own. We will not rest till the storm is over. We will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. We will not rest till the storm is over. Yeah, we will not lay this burden down. Well, we will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. I know that you're weary. We all feel the pain. Sometimes the actions of the world will try your soul again, but I believe there's a better day, and it's coming our way. That's why we're raising our voices as we work today. We will not rest till the storm is over. Hey, we will not lay this burden down. Well, we will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. We will not rest till the storm is over. Yeah, we will not lay this burden down. Well, we will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. Till we stand all together on solid ground. Till we stand all together on solid ground. Be well, be active, keep your eyes on the prize. Thanks again for joining us.